Okay. So, like I mentioned last week, we covered a huge part of 1 Timothy in regards to taking care of widows or elderly people and stuff. This week we're going to focus on a lot smaller section here. We're only going over 2 verses today. So, we'll continue in 1 Timothy, starting at verse 17. It's only 17 and 18 today. Elders who do their work well should be respected and paid well, especially those who work hard at both preaching and teaching. For the Scripture says, "You must not muzzle an ox to keep it from eating as it treads out the grain." And in another place, "Those who work deserve their pay." So, this is definitely one of those parts in Scripture that is almost impossible to be up here and talking about without seeming like self-serving. From being in this position, speaking to the body. So it's hard to address with people, and especially because it's talking about honoring your elders and making sure they're taken care of. So money is a very sensitive subject for people. It's one of those main hot buttons or whatever. Everyone's got sort of a Scrooge McDuck syndrome about them. Don't get between me and my money, and don't tell me how to manage it. Nonetheless, it needs to be taught, and we're talking about how to operate within God's household and how to view certain people and certain roles, how to take care of certain people and their roles, and how to honor people. So, as much as it's a hard thing to go over with you guys without seeming self-serving, it's biblical and it needs to be taught. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we previously went over in chapter 3 what this role looks like. So we have a pretty good context already of what people in these eldership roles, these preaching and teaching roles, what they look like. In chapter 3, if you recall, it gives a long list of must not drink too much, must be well respected, must manage their household well, must not be a lover of money, so on and so forth. So we have already a good context of this role and the importance of it, and we talked about that both when Colin preached about that specific role and when I preached about deacons and how we view them and how we honor them and stuff. So we should have this fairly fresh in our mind. So I don't think that there needs to be a lot of backtracking as far as that goes. But I do want to talk about a little bit more what these people mean to us and how we honor that and respect them. This is one of the reasons why I don't like the NLT. My Bible's NLT, but it doesn't always give you the best phrasage or whatever, or the best word, and so that's why it's important to look at other translations, and then look at the Greek and see what that says literally, what the Greek says. But so the first verse here, verse 17 says, elders who do their work well. I know some of you have the Holman, a lot of you, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, does it say rule in your guys's, or does it say lead well?
Good leaders should be considered worthy of ample honor.
Yeah, so it says to lead. It says do their work well, yours says to lead. Some of you guys might have a translation that says rule. Well, I know there's at least a few, I think King James Version says rule and stuff, but so the Greek that's used there is to set yourself in front of. or to stand before, sorry. So, direct the affairs of the church. The Greek word is used 6 times in the New Testament. It's used twice in Timothy, actually. It's used here in regards to these roles, these people. For us, it means to stand before. It's used in Romans when talking about spiritual gifts and leadership. It's used in Luke when it's talking about taking care of the Good Samaritan. So there's a nuance of assuming the responsibility for people and standing before them and taking care of them as a leader should. So we're talking about the household of God. So we should view these people, these elders, these pastors and teachers, that we should view them as our fathers in a sense, and as the leaders of the church. Not to say that, not to take credit away from Christ. Obviously, we know Christ is the head of the church, but these people they manage, if you will. They manage the church for Christ, and so we should respect them as fathers to us and respect what they do for us. So the Greek here, to rule or to lead well, means to stand before. So these people stand before us and direct and guide our spiritual well-being, our spiritual lives. They help us to understand God, help us to understand His Word, and help us to align us with Christ and align our lives with Christ. So in the context of this chapter, it goes on to say, elders who do their well should be respected and paid well, or worthy of double honor. I know that's what it says. Especially those who work hard at both preaching and teaching. So previously we found that Paul was talking about taking care of the widows in this aspect when he's talking about honor. So he's talking about, taking care of these people that can't take care of themselves, honoring them, I'm trying to not use specific words, but so a lot of people try to they try to turn this into something it's not. It's not talking about paying an elder or whatever. But we need to look at the context already of what's been laid out. And in the same breath, he's talking about, helping to pay for these widows and pay for their lives and their needs and stuff. He's saying the same thing about elders and those who work hard at preaching and teaching, and they're worthy of double honor. It says in the beginning of the chapter, never speak harshly to an older man, but appeal to him respectfully as you would your own father. And then it says here that these people are worthy of double honor. So they're worthy of double honor because they should be viewed as respected members of the community because of their age and their wisdom and what they have to offer there. But they should also be worthy of honor because of this other calling that they have and role to preach and teach God's word and to guide us in that way. So they're worthy of double honor for that reason. So, that's what Paul is talking about when he says worthy of double honor. I always start so well. I know. I'm reminded of, when I was going over this and stuff. It's weird how God works and just, conversations pop up that are just relevant to what I'm studying or what you're studying or whatever. Josh was talking to the cadre kids earlier this week about, they had something like Take Your Kid to Work Day or the equivalent, So Josh was talking to the kids about what it means to be an elder and what Josh does for a living and stuff. And one of the kids, I think it was, Josh just asked, John goes home after work at Regents at 4 o'clock or something, and then for the most part, John doesn't really have to worry about work after that, right? He's good until 7 or 8 the next day. But that's not the case with these people, with elders. They work 24/7 to be available to us as a body. They don't get to go home from it. It's the life they live. And so Paul is saying that these people, the weight of what they do should be appreciated by us as a body. He talks about, or he doesn't talk about it here, but in Thessalonians, Paul talks about Epaphroditus and his willingness to, die, essentially, to do the work he's doing. And how good that is because other people can't do it. If you guys want to turn to 1 Corinthians 9. It's sort of a lot, but I want to read it all. I really like 1 Corinthians 9 in reference to what we're talking about because it's relevant to the elder, the person with the specific calling from God to preach and teach and to be there, and then it's also relevant for how we view them as a body. So, 1 Corinthians 9. We'll just read the whole thing. Am I not as free as anyone else? Am I not an apostle? Haven't I seen Jesus our Lord with my own eyes? Isn't it because of my work that you belong to the Lord? Even if others think I am not an apostle, I certainly am to you. You yourselves are proof that I am the Lord's apostle. This is my answer to those who question my authority. Don't we have the right to live in your homes and share your meals? Don't we have the right to bring a Christian wife with us as the other apostles and the Lord's brothers do, and as Peter does? Or is it only Barnabas and I who have to work to support ourselves? What soldier has to pay his own expenses? What farmer plants a vineyard and doesn't have the right to eat some of its fruit? What shepherd cares for a flock of sheep and isn't allowed to drink some of the milk? Am I expressing merely a human opinion, or does the law say the same thing? For the law of Moses says you must not muzzle an ox to keep it from eating as it treads out the grain. Was God thinking only about oxen when he said this? Wasn't he actually speaking to us? Yes, it was written for us, so that the one who plows and the one who threshes the grain might both expect to share of the harvest. Since we have planted spiritual seed among you, aren't we entitled to a harvest of physical food and drink? If you support others who preach to you, shouldn't we have an even greater right to be supported? But if we have never used this right, we would rather put up with anything than be an obstacle to the good news about Christ. Don't you realize that those who work in the temple get their meals from the offerings brought to the temple, and those who serve at the altar get a share of the sacrificial offerings? In the same way, the Lord ordered that both those who preach the good news should be supported by those who benefit from it. Yet I have never used any of these gifts, and I am not writing this to suggest that I want to start now. In fact, I would rather die than lose my right to boast about preaching without charge. Yet preaching the good news is not something I can boast about. I am compelled by God to do it. How terrible for me if I didn't preach the good news. If I were doing this on my own initiative, I would deserve payment, but I have no choice, for God has given me this sacred trust. What then is my pay? It is the opportunity to preach the good news without charging anyone. That's why I never demand my rights when I preach the good news. Even though I am a free man with no master, I have become a slave to all people to bring many to Christ. When I was with the Jews, I lived like a Jew to bring the Jews to Christ. When I was with those who follow the Jewish law, I too lived under that law. Even though I am not subject to the law, I did this so I could bring to Christ those who are under the law. When I am with the Gentiles who do not follow the Jewish law, I too live apart from the law so I can bring them to Christ. But I do not ignore the law of God. I obey the law of Christ. When I am with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessing. Don't you realize that in a race everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing. I discipline my body like an athlete, training it to do what it should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to the others, I myself might be disqualified. I think that that's a really, like powerful expression of Paul. On the one hand, he's saying and like defending his position to people, like, he's basically like, I view it as him like pouring his like heart out to these people, like, don't you realize what I'm doing for you? You know, I'm trying to do right by God. I'm trying to like bring you closer to God and to like, you know, to give you the news about Christ. Don't you appreciate that? Don't you appreciate me? Isn't that worthy of you know, honor? I think it's a really good like standard for people in this position, you know, people striving to be elders or elders. In chapter 3 of Timothy, Paul says that elders shouldn't be lovers of money. And, I mean, here's a great example of that. He worked as, you know, a tent maker and stuff. He worked so that he didn't burden the church, you know, even though that his position was worthy of that, you know. I think it's a really good standard for elders. And I think that we have a really good, eldership, you know, like Josh works for nothing, essentially, you know. He takes pay cut after pay cut. He quits jobs so that he can serve the church full time, and he does it gladly. And he does it because God has called him to serve this body, you know, and he's willing to sacrifice whatever he has to serve it with like abandon. Do we appreciate that? I think that at times we really do. You know, we had a meeting the other day, or whatever, like a month ago, about what we're willing to do to get our elder out of this position he's in because of what he's given up and what he sacrificed, you know. We had a meeting to basically okay this loan pursuit that we got going on. So I think that at times we do, but I don't know if we always do. Like, would you guys, you know, like those of you that work to provide for your family, which is, you know, most of us, you know, Wendy or John or Alex or myself even, like, would you be willing to, you're not in an eldership position, but it's a statement like of intent for God, you know, like, I'm going to give up everything to serve you. Paul also says that we basically, you know, the eldership, the person with this calling, they have to, basically. They, you know, he says, what does he say? He says, well, I switched the page, but what if I didn't, you know? How terrible for me, you know? He has to honor this calling for God, even though he knows that maybe he's not going to get honored by the people that he's serving. So I think it's a really good standard, and I think that it's a good defense to the argument of, you know, this passage is self-serving to the minister who's teaching it or something like that. I think it's a good standard for, you know, the believer, or just the member of the body that you know, doesn't or needs a reminder or something like that of this position that these people are in and what they mean for us. Do we like fully appreciate that? How many people know that James like badly wishes, like in his heart, like he badly desires to not work at the IRS anymore because he would rather be here and serving you guys? That's heavy, you know? Like, do we really appreciate that? Like, what are we I know we're like a small body, so our resources are limited, but what do we do or think about in order to like honor those people and those desires, you know? James can't just quit his job, you know? Yeah. I don't know, it hits me hard. I think about when Pastor Monty, officially, retired last year, and this caught me off guard. I don't know, but when we were sitting here and he was up here, receiving this recognition, do we feel that, I sat over there afterward and just was thinking about Pastor Monty and what he has meant for me, in my walk with God, and I was having a weird time warp back in time of what Pastor Monty has sacrificed and what he's had to do to get to a point of where he's at. The truths that he had to stand firm in, and how that affects all of us. He created, he had to make a decision that would eventually create this church, and we're all here because of that, as a result of that. So it caught me off guard, it's catching me off guard now, but I think that if we feel that, in our heart, then we're willing to, do whatever we can to honor these people, Maybe it's resources we can give to them to show that. Maybe it's just service. Maybe it's just thinking about them when they need to be thought about. I don't know. Directly following Pastor Monty's retirement, Josh became the head elder of this church. What do we do to honor that? Did we even think about that, or maybe we don't? I don't know. Maybe we don't have an appreciation for what it means that Josh is now the head elder of Aletheia. I don't know. Maybe you guys should ask what that means if you don't know. But so now Josh is in this position. What did we do to honor it? Did we even mention it, or say thank you, or just have a moment to ourselves to appreciate what this person or that person means to us? I sort of went off my notes just now. Yeah, do we honor those people who work hard? Paul makes a distinction about especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching, people who's 100% committed to serving the body that they're in, or serving people, I'm not trying to take anything away from James because he has to work, but he has to work so it doesn't burden us, How do we feel about that? Do we appreciate that? Do we respect these people like fathers? I think part of the reason why I was affected so much by Pastor Monty is because he gave to me in a way that my own dad couldn't or didn't. So, in a way, Pastor Monty is like that for me. What are we doing? What are we doing, guys, to, honor these people? Are we, holding on to things? I was doing I was looking at different things and how, just as a culture, we live in such excess, and we this is ironic because I'm the sports guy, I get that. I'm wearing a freaking Timbers jersey as I'm talking about it right now, but the professional sports world is a $100 billion industry. I think the NFL last year in revenue made I don't know, I have it on my thing, but it's hundreds of billions of dollars because people respect them so much or honor what they do, or they make millions of dollars a year to kick a ball or throw a ball or shoot a ball, or hit a ball, whatever. These people are responsible for leading our spiritual and eternal lives and helping us in that, taking our hand and giving it to Christ or God, you know? There's a serious disparity, and it's really sad. And a lot of people think that, or they'll try and say like, well, I don't like that because the church should be giving to the needy and so on and so forth. You know, I don't want to pay to the church when it can, whatever. And I think there's some truth to that. Like the church has managed to do wrong by the way they like take care of things, you know. And I think it's a commendable way of thinking, like, you know, take care of the needy. And I think we should, but we should be taking care of these spiritual leaders in our lives. And that's what's biblical and beautiful. As people in this position, as much as we deserve it, you know, I'm going to just say we, because I'm here talking about it, you know, I'm not officially at that level yet in our position, but we should be doing it with, like, no strings attached. As Paul says, you know, we shouldn't be lovers of money. We should do it because it's our calling, and we gladly do, you know. But they deserve honor, and they deserve that respect. And so what do we do to show that? Are we stingy with our time to them? Are we stingy with our money to them? Are we stingy with thinking about them just when they need to be thought about? You know, like I mentioned with Josh. Do we even know, like I mentioned with James, do we even know what James's like real desire is and how he feels like he can't give himself fully because he has to do this other thing which pulls from that? Christ said to the apostles as they were going out to not bring anything with them, to leave behind their money bags and just go out and, you know, minister to these people. Allow them to take care of you if they will, and be okay with accepting that. Christ tells them to do it, to just go. But there's also a calling on our behalf to honor that. Yeah. I mean, I can only speak for like my own convictions and from my own heart, but I think about like, you know, the way Haven operates and how, just to be vulnerable and to give you some insight in case you didn't already have it, Colin and I bear the brunt of supporting Haven. And I look at this verse and what the calling is for us, and I think to myself, like, and I have to remind myself about it occasionally, just to be honest, but I read this and I think about this and I think, like, I'll gladly, like, put a roof over Josh's head or, you know, whatever. Like, it would be my pleasure to do that. What has Josh done for me in my life? I mean, I can't even, like, yeah. So how do we view these people, guys? What do we do for them? How have we been stingy, for lack of a better word, with them? How do we show our appreciation for them and our time and our money and our resources, whatever we can give to them? Do we give to them and appreciate them for who they are and what they do for us? Do we really appreciate what they're doing for us, the sacrifice they make for us? You know, they don't go home at 4 o'clock. They're like ready for us whenever we need them to be. So how do we respect that? That's really all I have as far as a question. I don't really know how else to give it to you guys, but I would challenge you to think about that.